Hello, everyone. My name is Dwayne. I got a video for that Kimball, United States Army veteran and retired VA rating specialist. I am joined today by David Piatek, coming over from VA Housing Education. How are you doing today, David?
I'm doing great, Dwayne. Just glad that it's warming up everywhere across the country, not just in your neck of the woods, but happy to be here. And thanks for having me on again.
Hey, not a problem, not a problem. I think we got a very important topic. I know we've talked about this before on some of our lives, but a lot of veterans have been wondering, and I know even during our lives, they've been asking the question, if I'm 100% permanent total, can I purchase a home and how much? But before we get into that, I think there's a lot of veterans out there that don't know they are or could be 100% permanent total just based off some of the injuries that they sustained while in the military. And as a former VA Raider, some of those injuries where I saw veterans, path of least resistance to get to that 100%. Now, I do understand that not all veterans want 100%. I get that. It could be 60, 70, 80, 90%. But the fastest way there that I've seen veterans, as a former VA Raider that adjudicated hundreds of claims, a mental condition. And on the average, a lot of those mental conditions were rated at 70%. Then you have tinnitus. Now, I think tinnitus is one of the easiest claims to win, but also is one of the easiest claims to not get or lose. Okay. Also, sleep apnea, migraines at the 50% for criteria for both, 50% for both. And then joints. A lot of veterans, they miss out on even claiming joints because it's 10% for all joints with pain except the shoulders, which if you only have pain is 20%. And I just did a video on that actually. So getting to that 100%, I've seen veterans that felt, hey, I do deserve 100% and get there. But the big question, you get to 100%, what kind of home can you afford?
So there's a couple things that go with that, Dwayne, and it's a question a lot of veterans ask, and they don't even realize that they can use and qualify solely on VA disability income on their own. So with that, we've seen people qualify for a single family or a condo, uh, or like a barnomium, as long as like around being a single family home, up to about 400,000 ish, providing that you have good credit and you have minimal liabilities. So not having like $1,000 car payments, because that'll definitely throw the numbers off
Yeah.
for you. And we've also seen people be able to go up to 1,300,000 by purchasing a multifamily property. Now, there is some caveats to purchasing a multifamily. One of them being that you need to have 6 months of reserve. So if your mortgage payment is 5,000 a month, you need to have 5 times 6 of that saved up in some type of retirement account or checking account, a money market account. You can't have cash in hand, and you can't get that cash as a gift because it won't count towards reserves. So you actually have to have that money and save it. And we see, everyone's financial picture is a little bit different, but we've definitely seen veterans be able to qualify with just their VA disability income for that alone. And a couple things with that multifamily is that you can use the rent rolls to actually qualify. Lenders will use 75% of that amount to give you back in your income. So you really have to be careful, because in theory, you could put yourself in a pretty bad position if you don't budget well and if you don't put tenants in that property. That's why they want you to have that 6-month reserve.
Right. Now, do veterans need a lease already signed? Well, I guess they wouldn't have a lease signed
No,
because
well,
they wouldn't own the property.
there's sometimes leases already on the property, but just note, on a multifamily, you do have to live in one of the units. So they're only going to count, and let's say a 4 unit, they're going to count 3 out of the 4 leases. Same thing, 3 unit, 1 out of the, and then 2 that have to be leased out. But you
Right.
don't need to have current leases on the property in order for you to use it. That's why you need to have the reserves, because an appraiser is going to let the lender know well, this is how much what the market rent is for the area. And that's what they're going to use.
Okay.
75% of that income is going to be added back to your income. I think it's one of the greatest. I mean, that's one of the greatest tools with the multifamily that you can utilize, because you also have with your VA disability rating, depending on where you are in the city, county, state, you can also qualify for property tax breaks. So single family homes, typically condos, that's pretty straightforward. But multifamilies do get a little bit tricky because sometimes they'll be like only your unit is exempt, but the other 3 units you have to pay taxes on. And then
Okay.
sometimes there's actually ways that you can get the whole building exempt, like especially if you have short-term rentals, but you have to ask the county assessor's office on how they do it. So, what we see a lot of veterans, Dwayne, doing is, especially from like watching videos like this, and they're like, oh man, I didn't realize I could do this. They'll go be transitioning from one state to another. A lot of people are picking Arizona, Florida, and Texas for some reason recently. But they're moving down there and they don't research the areas. And when we start looking into it, they'll be like, oh, there's an income cap on how much you can get, or they may only have a certain reduction in assessed value. They don't get the full tax exemption. So that's why you have to do the research, especially when you're banking on something like that to be able to work. Now, when it comes to your rating itself, right? So if anywhere from 10 to the 100% PNT, right? From the least, I mean, I guess least could be not qualify or not even applying, or 0%, but at the 10% or greater mark, that income could be used immediately to qualify for a home loan. So if you have a regular job making X amount of money, your VA disability actually gets tagged onto that income right away. There's no like a year or two limit like some incomes have, like for example, self-employment income. Then you can actually use that to qualify for the home loan. So as long as you have your award letter showing when it's starting or it's already started, then you are able then to access that money. Plus, lenders actually give you an additional 25% of that in income because that money is tax free. So lenders kind of adjust it for
Mm.
debt to income purposes. But you just have to be careful with it because you don't want to go down. Hey, you might have 100% TDIU, but and the lender's going to take that and qualify you with it. But not all places also will have a tax exemption if you're TDIU. You sometimes have to be PNT. And what would happen if you were to lose that income, right? Which would be unfortunate, but we've seen it happen. I just talked to someone today at a VA event, and they're like, yeah, I was downgraded on my VA disability. So they went from 100 to 70. That's a huge difference, especially if that's the sole income you qualified for.
Right, right. Well, I want to touch on that here in a minute. But let's talk about some numbers because a lot of veterans, they don't go out to the VA's website and look at the compensation rate table. So let's talk about these numbers. Let's look at them real quick. For a veteran with one child, 100%, 39.74, $3,974, 90%, 24.25. So,
Huge difference.
oh yeah, big time, about $1,500 a month difference, right? And then with one child and a spouse, it jumps up from 39.74 to 42.01. Then you can see it goes up to 43.72, 45, 44. Then it goes back down with one child and one parent, 41.45, and then one with one child and two parents, 43.17. These numbers do not include SMCs, special monthly compensations. So if you're a veteran with one child, or let's just say veteran, one child and one spouse, 4,200, and you have SMCS, housebound, you're probably pushing close to $5,000, especially if you throw in your male, you throw in SMCK or female, doing SMCK, you're right there at that $5,000 a month
Oh,
tax free. That's a lot of money, right?
oh yeah.
So I always tell veterans, make sure they go out to the VA compensation rate table and look at what they have. And also the VA, I think it's December 15th of every year, they send you a benefits summary letter and they tell you this is the percent that your overall percentage. If you're 100%, it'll tell you If you're permanent total, yes. And have you seen veterans, use that as proof of income, or they need some other things to go along with that?
So when we well, let me back up a second. So lenders request what's called a certificate of eligibility, which is going to actually tell the lender that yes, you're exempt from paying the VA funding fee.
Hmm.
And on there, it's going to list how much you're receiving on a monthly basis. Now, what we've seen is that if you recently got an upgrade, or I guess an increase in your VA disability, it may not reflect on that letter right away. So typically what you'll do is just go to your mobile app, which is the easiest to find, because like I find it when I go to the va.gov, I'm like, I cannot find that letter unless I like do some
Yeah.
crazy searching. But you just need to provide the benefits letter. And on there it's going to state the 100%. It'll tell you
Hmm.
if you're P&T or not. And then typically what we'll do is we'll actually take that, turn it around, submit it to the VA so they can actually update it correctly. Because one, you technically could just do it with that benefits letter, but at the same time, it's easier if you just get the whole thing updated for the veteran in one shot, anyways. Plus, then the VA has it recorded in their system. So it's important just to get that updated. But I mean, because people will go, file for increases, and then sometimes you have a decrease that will happen,
Right.
which isn't beneficial by any means. But you also have to be really aware of what your budget is when you're buying a home, so you're not going to overextend yourself.
How long does it take? So veterans at 90%, they file a claim, they get upgraded to 100%. But in the meantime, like you said, they went through the process, they got that certificate of eligibility, and it shows that they're at 90%. So when you mentioned getting that upgrade, how long does it take for them to upgrade that certificate of eligibility once a veteran gets that 100%?
So that typically just takes a couple months. Now, one thing that I have a silver lining here. If you're going from 90 or even 10 to another percentage, typically you're going to have back pay. So for some
Mhm.
veterans, they'll be like, "Well, I don't have the reserves. I don't have the closing costs, which typically are 2 to 3% of the purchase price." You can actually use your back pay as part of your reserves, and you can use that money towards closing costs. So not only can you all of a sudden use the new rating to qualify for a potentially higher amount, which isn't necessarily like a good thing, right? But some people just have certain areas or places they want to live. Those properties have certain price points, which will then equal certain payments. Don't forget about your tax breaks along with that. So you can use the back pay towards reserves. You can use the back pay towards closing costs, moving costs, furniture costs, things that you need.
Mhm.
You can also use that money to pay off debt to put yourself in a better credit position. This is why budgeting is so important, that you need to track how much you're spending on a monthly, bringing in monthly and spending every month, especially if you're on a fixed budget or variable budget. Like if you're self employed, that's probably even more so need to do it. But at least it lets you control your credit so you have the best credit, so you have the best chances. Because, Dwayne, I'm always saying, when you don't need money, people want to give it to you. When you need it, they don't, right? And it's
Oh,
all
yeah.
in that budget and credit piece, because with good credit, you can get out of a lot of things. Like if an emergency happens, if your car breaks down, you're
Yep.
not getting loans at 30%. You're getting loans at the best possible rates, best rates possible. Again, putting yourself in a better position. And I would say, in this process, no matter where you're at, right? This video isn't necessarily like you want to buy a house now, you need to contact us. It's, hey, looking into the future as you go through life, everyone hits different stages. Dwayne, we have veterans that use the VA loan for the first time that are in their 80s, right?
Mm.
First time buying a home. It does. And then we have people that are, the youngest is 19 for me that I've, helped purchase a home. And then somebody into their 80s. I mean, just think about that. It's a huge spread that veterans could take advantage of their VA loan, which also, by the way, for everyone out there, there's no limit on when you can use it. Well, there's a limit on when you could start using it. Like if you're in the Guard or Reserve, right? If you have to have minimum 6 years unless you have prior duty. So there's that restriction. But once you're eligible to use it, it's normally a life benefit that you can use. And with the VA disability compensation, if you were to pass away from a service connected disability, and you qualify for indemnity compensation, then
Mhm.
the VA loan passes on to the spouse. So now the spouse can use it And furthermore, if the veteran had the VA disability that meets not paying property taxes, that also gets passed on to the spouse. So
Right.
that's huge benefit for folks.
Right. And I think that's where two things that you talked about, having an earlier effective date, veterans doing
Oh yeah.
making sure they do the intent to file, because sometimes the VA rates these claims sooner, some a little bit later, which means that back pay, if you get service connected, would be a little bit higher. And the second part that you touched on was veteran spouses. I cannot tell you how many times a spouse, I think it was just about a week ago, a spouse reached out and said, "Hey, my husband passed away this past December." Luckily, she was already getting DIC. But I talked to so many spouses, they'll be like, "Well, what's that?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Was your was your husband service connected?" "I don't know." And I'm like, veterans, we have to get out of that brainwash mentality that the military it made us start, think like, suck it up, suck it up. And when we get out, we're still sucking it up. And a lot of veterans are not thinking about their family members, their
Yeah.
spouses. And once they've passed and, gone on and the spouse is still here, they're like, "Oh, my husband had this, my wife had that." And I'm like, "Did they even file a claim?" "I don't know. What is that?" I was down at the VFW and somebody said, "Hey, you're entitled to benefits." And they didn't give them the whole story. So that's why I tell veterans, regardless, if you don't do it for you, do it for your family,
Yeah.
especially if you were injured, you may have had a major injury on active duty or just jumped out of planes perfectly,
Good.
flying plane at Fort Bragg. I think it's what, Fort Liberty now. Being airborne, twisting ankles, your back, whatever. So there's things that you could be doing while you're still here. So when you're not here, you can pass those benefits on to the spouse, like you stated. So as we wrap up, Dave, do you think we missed anything? Fastest
Well,
way to 100%? The kind of type of homes you could buy, how much you could afford? I don't think we missed anything, did we?
yeah, there's definitely a lot of information behind this stuff. And I'll just tell everyone that's out there watching right now, we've been doing these videos now for what, almost 2 years. Just
Yeah.
make you go to the VA Housing Education channel and just check out in the search feature what you're looking for, right? VA disability, type of loans. We have a video on buying land, which is a great way to set up yourself for the future. So there's so many options with the program and little nuances. You can spend time when you're driving or on the weekends when you're relaxing, just listening to financial information. So,
Yeah.
but thanks again for Dwayne having me on here, and we'll catch you guys soon.
No problem. Thank you, Dave. And make sure to get a hold of Dave and or his team. We have their contact information in the description section. How do you get there? The lower left-hand side of the video, click on show more, and you will find a lot of information. Also, David's VA Housing Education YouTube channel link will be there as well. So with that being said, make sure you like, subscribe, hit that notification button, and as always, share this video with your fellow veterans. Thank you.